Hi. Welcome. So it's the last conference of the day. It's very businessy, speaky things. So I'm usually like when it's very developer-oriented meetings, there's like the room is full, and I'm used to having like 8 people in the room, so that's cool. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to see should I be upgrading my Drupal 7 site, or making sure it's in the same Drupal 7 version but enhancing it, or transferring over, migrating to Drupal 8. The conference should be about half an hour-ish, so it's not going to take the full 45 or minutes or an hour. And we have time for questions if need be after. If not, whatever, and we'll have time to chat back in the Come On Styles space. So I'm kind of hiding the screen, so I'm just going to move sideways. I thought of having maybe some kind of a concrete example going through the conference, and have like an example of like I'm a pet store and I want to, I have a catalog of products online, and should I use this or not? So I'll try to think of doing that as an example as we go through, but it's kind of, I'll move through it as we can. So there's 5 things I want to go through just about Symmetris, the company that I'm part of, where we come from, why I should be having this talk with you guys, why the question of knowing if you should upgrade or just migrate is important, the differences and similarities between D7 and D8, like a really quick overview, and finally, what are the factors that are going to influence your decision, especially regarding risks and benefits for your organization, and then kind of a conclusion of saying, well, which scenario should we be upgrading and which scenario should we be migrating? So first of all, a little about us. So we were founded 13 years ago. We have 17 experts, and we're the team with the most certified Drupal developers in Quebec. We've been masters of Drupal since Drupal 5. Wow. And we're regular DrupalCamp presenters and sponsors, at least since 2014. I don't know if prior to that. So we've been involved quite a bit with the community. This is our kind of cool team, and we're all having a nice fun. I'm president at Symmetris. I kind of fell into Drupal because we didn't found the company to be a Drupal development firm. We wanted to do kind of websites just in general, and I had an employee at the time who had done some Drupal at another. Actually, he was from New Zealand, and he had done Drupal at the government there, and we said, oh, this is interesting, and we were exploring all kinds of CMSs back in the day when CMSs weren't so prevalent. A lot of companies had their own CMS at the time, and we found that Drupal and WordPress were really good, and going forward, we found that Drupal really fit with our company because we're a company that do a lot of complex projects, lots of permissions, connections with APIs, and stuff like that. I also, by the way, love traveling, philosophy, music, and my 2 little girls. So, should we stay with Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, and why is that question important? Well, first of all, I'm just going to start with a few assumptions. And, maybe since we're such a nice small group, we can have maybe a better idea of who you guys are. So I'm guessing people here already are using Drupal 7, like by a hands up or whatever. Okay, everybody, okay. So I don't need to convince you that Drupal is cool. That's done. Now you want to maintain or evolve your existing platform or website, and you're looking for an answer that is more business speak. So I'm here I'm not going to show you any code. I'm not going to go into technobabble. I'm just going to say what decision is best organization-wise in this context. So. And just as a side note, has anybody in the audience already made that decision to either move or stay, and you're just here to kind of validate their decision? All right, so which decision did you take? Move, so you moved to Drupal 8. Okay, exciting. So I'm going to be interested in checking if your conclusions are similar to mine. Yeah. The elements that are going to impact your decision is obviously the first kind of business decision to ask is what's the best return on my investment, especially in cost, in time, be it an internal team or external team. How much time, okay, well, I'm saying that twice. Will there be any changes to the flexibility, to the stability, to the performance of my existing platform? Is it going to be easier to maintain for the site administrators, so people who add content and manage that, and also for the team of developers who maintain the website? So those are different aspects we have to take into account when we make that decision of should we be moving to D8 or staying with D7. And of course, there's like no spoilers here. The answer is it depends. And the goal of this presentation is to help you guys make your own decisions and know which aspects to look at in the website and which ones weigh more heavily in your context. So, before we I'm just going to go through the aspect of D7 versus D8 kind of in a high-level mode to understand. So first of all, D7 was launched in January 2011, D8 about a year and a half ago. So they're 5 years apart. So obviously Drupal 7 is older. That also means it has more maturity, a lot more modules exist for Drupal 7, a lot more people know how to use Drupal 7, so that can be an advantage. So it's more test-proven, it's been around. Now Drupal 8, after a year and a half now, it's starting to gain the maturity it needs to be kind of an easy, kind of, if you're building a new site, I would never hesitate to recommend Drupal 8 right now. Maybe a year ago, when it had been only 6 months on the market, I would be like, well, maybe this, maybe that. We actually had a potential client or contact or whatever was asking us this week, I'd like to add a star rating on my website for my products. Can I use this module? And then we kind of explore it. And two of the most used modules to add star ratings in Drupal 7 are not yet fully ready in Drupal 8. So these are the types of things that you're going to encounter if you're moving into Drupal 8, because not all the modules are going to be production ready. They're still going to be in development or in alpha or beta, but they're not 100% ready. You can still use them, but kind of with your own risks attached. So that's just to kind of give you a context of both of them. Now, I'm just going to talk about now D8 as opposed to D7. So in D8, the three main elements that are technical that enhance it are easier configuration management. So the configurations, okay, the kind of settings and the lists of information and the users and all that, and the way it's configured is no longer in the database, it's all in the code. And what does that mean? It means that it's easier to deploy a website. Because in the past, what would happen is, I'm deploying the website, but someone was updating some content on the live site, and when I'm pushing the old or like the production version of a new feature onto the site, I have to kind of make it like a freeze so that they're not inputting content while I'm pushing stuff, because there's configurations that are in the database, but also the content now that no longer exists. All those configurations are in the code, so all you're doing is pushing code, and the content can just stay in your live site in Drupal 8. So that makes deployments easier. And maintenance of a website is much more sophisticated when you're updating specific parts of it. Secondly, the code is cleaner. The templating system uses Symfony. I'm not mistaken. It's
Twig with it.
Twig which is based on Symfony. Matthew here is part of my team. And this makes and the structure of how we're supposed to code in Drupal 8 is more rigid. It's more object oriented. So there's a lot less leeway for a developer to not necessarily code the right way, a specific module or whatever. So that means that the code is cleaner and easier to maintain in Drupal 8. And finally, a lot more modules are in the core. So when you're in Drupal 7, you install the core of Drupal, and then you add on all these modules. And a lot of developers kind of, by reflex, would add on like 20 some odd modules because they know they're essential to all websites that are needed. So in Drupal 8, a lot of those modules that they realize that people are always using, they decide to add them to the core, and that also makes them more standardized because the core itself is maintained by Acquia, which is the company behind Drupal. So they're more robust, I'd say, and better quality. And two of those modules that are very important when you're building a Drupal website are views. So views is the module that lets you create lists of information, be it lists of products, lists of users, lists of events or whatever, and even like lists of blog articles or whatever. So views is used for that. And multilingualism used to be like this two separate modules of internationalization and then multilingualism. Localization. Anyway, so all that stuff is now merged into the core. So you don't need to install these separate modules, and it's all in there. So going into the future in Drupal 8 websites, multilingualism is very well adapted, and that's great for us in Montreal and Canada in general. Now, that's the technical side. For business-wise, why Drupal 8? Well, it's easier to edit content for content editors. So the way it's structured to manage content is easier, and you can even, as I'm mentioning here, you can the back end of Drupal is now completely mobile. So you could like be at this event and publish an article on your website through the mobile interface of editing Drupal 8. And Drupal 7, you had to install some kind of a skin, and not everything was necessarily mobile friendly in there. As mentioned earlier, since the multilingualism is core, there's a better support for multilingualism. There's digital. Yeah. So digital ecosystem integrations, there's more of them in Drupal 8. So connecting with external tools by API or whatnot, a lot of those integrations are already built in. Deployments are faster since we said that the code is no longer kind of half in the database and half in the code, and each time you deploy is kind of complicated. Now, since everything is in the code, you can just kind of transfer over and migrate super fast. Deploy super fast. So if you have a context where you're constantly deploying, like an application or whatever, where every couple of weeks you have a new deployment, then that's easier to do. And if you have a website that has a lot of views or users and is really heavy on requirements, so then performance and scalability are a bit better in Drupal 8. If you have a very lightweight site, you probably won't see that much of a difference, but in larger sites, you can see that. And finally, there's a concept in Drupal 8 that was in Drupal 7. There was this kind of concept of headless Drupal, which is kind of maintained, and in Drupal 8 makes it much easier to implement. So it means that your Drupal is used as kind of where you're managing your content, but the way that content is displayed doesn't need to be through Drupal. So you could, for example, have a promotion. Let's say I'm at that pet shop and I have this promotion, and I want it to appear on the website, but I also want it to appear on like my Facebook page, but I also want it to appear in store, on the screen, behind the cache or whatever, and I would just upload it into the Drupal in one place, and that could connect to all these different interfaces and show that content. So there's kind of a disconnect between where you're managing your content in the Drupal and how that content is being exported or displayed to users in all kinds of different contexts. And Drupal 8 really has that separation between the content itself and the way that content is displayed. You could actually have not use Drupal to display content at all. You can just use it as managing your content. So those are kind of the high-level advantages of using Drupal 8 versus Drupal 7. So now let's look into different factors that can influence the decision of what are the risks and what are the benefits of all this. So factors that influence this. So your current Drupal 7 setup. The main aspect that influences that is your level of customization of your Drupal 7 website or application. So if you have a fairly straightforward, simple Drupal 7 site, that's probably something that's easy to migrate over to Drupal 8. But if you have a very custom built, let's say you have a specific workflow, with all kinds of automations, integrations with data from other systems, or very modules that were not used from the community that were really specifically built for you guys, then that's going to really impact the ease of migration towards Drupal 8. So the more complex your system is, the more difficult it is to migrate. Secondly, the quantity of data and the complexity of that data. So if your website has tons and tons of data and different types of fields of that data, and that data interacts with different sections of the website, let's say again in my pet shop context, I would have a list of products that are attributed to certain types of dogs, and each of those types of dogs have different types of characteristics. And then there's all kinds of integrations with when I'm going on that dog's profile, I can see the products that are related to him, but in this type of context, not this or not that. And then that would link, for example, your products are automatically generated from a database you have in-house, which is an, I don't know, whatever structure, and that's kind of automatically synced. All this volume of data is going to be something, and complexity of that data is going to be something that's going to make transferring over to Drupal 8 more complex as well. So if you have just, let's say, a list of events in a calendar, blog articles, and let's say a list of people in the team or something, and there's no, it's not more integrated than that, maybe just have like the people in the team and a link towards which articles they wrote or something, then that would be something that would be easy to move over to Drupal 8. But if you're going further than that, then it's a bit more complex. Obviously, budget is an important factor. Migrating to Drupal 8 is obviously going to be, in the short run, more costly and time-consuming than just kind of upgrading your Drupal 7 and maintaining it. Okay, so but you have to see it as an investment. So, and I'm going to talk about it a bit later on, but your kind of milestones in the coming months and years are going to impact when you should be making that investment of migrating over or not. So upfront, just saying, hey, I want to add like a new field in my contact form, that is going to take like literally like 3 hours if you're doing it on your Drupal 7 website, and if you're going to migrate the whole thing over to Drupal 8 and then add that, it's going to take you something like, I don't know, 400 hours, So just have to kind of take that into account when you're thinking about budget and time. What is the scope of the upcoming enhancements? So again, I was talking about adding a field into a contact form. That's not a humongous enhancement to a website. But if you're planning on adding an entirely new section to the website, or let's say, again, with a pet shop, I want to add an extranet for all my suppliers, for all my products, that they can kind of connect to some kind of a special portal for partners, and then they can update their different products they can offer, or have special pricing or something. That's a major enhancement to your website, so that might justify, let's move to, since we're going to be building that whole new thing, we're going to have to rebuild it again in Drupal 8, let's just rebuild the whole thing now from scratch and move over. In that kind of scope enhancements, I also kind of take into account of, are you planning any major redesign? Because if you're saying, hey, my branding or my site is feeling old, and it's been, let's say, 3 or 4 years, we haven't really made any significant improvements to its look or feel, and maybe within a year or two we might be doing that kind of big overhaul visually, well then that would be the time to transfer over to Drupal 8 and not now wait for that, kind of trying to have things happen at the same time, because Drupal 8 has that investment to it. So let's add a couple of other items to it while you're doing it. The lifetime of your existing website. And that kind of is related to what I just said, as in, let's say you built your website 2 years ago, and it's this, I don't know, maybe it's a web application where people are, sharing information about their favorite pet food or something. If you're not planning on saying, I don't need a redesign for this, but I want to just kind of last for the next 5 years and just kind of let it stay put, then the timing of how long you want it to last is going to have an impact. In the past, Drupal versions have been discontinued, let's say 2 versions down the line. So let's say Drupal 7 would theoretically have no more support when Drupal 9 comes out. And usually that's kind of a timeline of about 5 years-ish. So if Drupal 8 was launched about a year ago, so that means in about 4 years down the line, Drupal 7 will probably not be maintained or will have some kind of discontinued maintenance. So that's, if you're planning on more than, let's say, 3 or 4 years down the line to maintain your website, then I would recommend moving over to D8, even if there's no significant enhancements that you want to bring to that website. And finally, if this is a completely new or a standalone project, then I would definitely recommend going with Drupal 8 right now. When I say standalone, is a couple of our clients have like an ecosystem of several websites. And that might be an impact of saying, well, I have all these, like I have these 5 other websites in Drupal 7, and they're very kind of interconnected or very similar. If you're going to build a D8 project, and if you're kind of maintaining the same structure of those other websites, then you might as well kind of just do it in D7, because it's all going to be, the way you update them and the way you manage them are all going to be kind of streamlined. If that project is really standalone from the rest of your ecosystem, then kind of move over to D8. Otherwise, you'd have to move the entire, it would be easier to move the entire kind of ecosystem to D8 to have everything standardized. All right. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare both scenarios. So I'm going to say, based on everything we've been saying for the last 20 minutes or so, in which case, like, what are the criteria for saying, hey, I'm going to stay with D7. These are the criteria of staying with D7, and these are the criteria of moving to D8. So stay with D7 if you aren't planning any major enhancements onto your website. Stay with D7 if you are planning a complete redesign within the next 2 years. So just stay with D7 and wait till that moment happens. Stay with D7 if you have lots of custom developed modules, such as custom workflows or interactions with external systems and data. Of all the things that can make a website break or go over budget or whatever it is, from our experiences, integration with an external system. It could be a CRM, it could be an internal database, it could be whatever it is, but there's always like an element that you have not foreseen or a complexity in the synchronization that always causes hassles. If you need to deploy very quickly, like in a matter of days or weeks, we need to get this thing online, then stay with your Drupal 7 setup. And if you need to keep the budget as light as possible in the short term, and let's say you're in an organization where you have to kind of ask for a budget, and then the budget is going to be allocated in the next financial year, and blah, 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 well, then you better stay with your D7 and wait till that kind of larger budget envelope is unlocked to move over to D7. To D8, sorry. And again, just as a side note, what's going to happen is that maintaining the older D7 website is going to get more and more time consuming over time. So it's going to be reducing your budget in the short term, but the longer you wait to move to Drupal 8, the more costly it's going to be to move over, and the more maintenance work it's going to take, because as we said, deployments and all that is much more, it's much simpler in D8. And upgrade to D8. So now obviously the list is a bit longer because D8 is now kind of the norm, I'd say. So if you have an important new feature to add, so as I was mentioning, like that new extranet or big new feature onto your website, definitely move on to D8. Upgrade to D8 if you need to guarantee ongoing support for 4 or 5 years or more. So knowing that support for Drupal 8 is going to probably be for the next 9 years or so, you don't have to worry about any security issues or whatever, as long as you regularly maintain your modules and code. Upgrade if you're regularly updating content or use multiple languages. So if you're every week you have several postings of information or updates of information, it's just going to simplify the life of the team that's managing the content on that website. So just do that migration. It's going to seem like it's useless. You can even stay with the same design, but again, it's just the time people are going to save is going to be worth it. If your website is low complexity, then it's going to be low complexity to move it over to Drupal 8. So that's a cool thing to keep in mind. Now, it would be nice if you can have that investment of saying, hey, I'm going to spend more money up front to reduce the cost down the line. Not everybody has that privilege, but again, moving over to D8 now is going to save you headaches down the line. And if you have frequent deployments, so regular updates or to the code or features of your web application or web platform, then that's definitely an advantage of moving to D8. High requirements, again, performance stability, as I mentioned a bit earlier. And obviously, if you're starting a new project and that's completely outside of an existing ecosystem that you have to respect the structure of, then yeah, go ahead with D8. I mentioned this in the sense that I think we were, like McGill has a very structured way of, deploying all their Drupal websites and everything, and we were on this specific project and was so apart from the rest that one could be approaching D8, but most of McGill's projects, if I'm not mistaken, unless it's changed, still have to be in D7 because their structure is already all set and all their kind of multiple websites are all in that language or technology. So that's it. So yeah, this is like our flash end of day conference. I was wondering if you had any questions. I'm interested maybe in finding out if that decision moving to D8, did you consider these factors as well? Or?
Yeah, actually, the first site that we're moving is because a major upgrade is, and the site is not very complicated.
Okay, well there you go. So
yeah,
so it was a clearly
no-brainer.
Yeah, no-brainer. Right? Cool. Any other kind of questions or comments? Clarity and precision. All right.
I have one concerning actually workflows, because actually in Drupal 7 there is a plugin for that, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And actually it's currently in our Drupal 8, and there are also core modules in Drupal 8 for workflow, but it's not, they are experimental. So I know it's kind of a blur question, it's not really definitive yet, but when do you think it's going to be possible to go with Drupal 8 concerning specifically workflows?
Well, it depends how you structured your workflows, and I know that our team has had a lot of questions about using rules, because I don't know if that's the module you guys are using, and I think Matthew here is like itching to answer your question, so I'm going to leave the...
Oui, c'est ça. C'est la version... c'est en français.
Oh, c'est bon.
Okay. Oui, c'est ça, la version le workflow, il est comme juste en alpha présentement. Puis, pour l'avoir comme installé puis testé, l'un des problèmes qu'il y a, c'est, tu sais, des fois tu vas sauvegarder une rules puis là, ça ne fonctionnera pas. Puis c'est peut-être une rules que tu as besoin. Cela dit, nous, notre team, avec l'expérience, on essaie de s'éloigner de plus en plus de cette petite configuration-là puis plus utiliser les hooks du core pour ça. Parce que finalement, quand tu veux faire quelque chose avec le workflow, tout ce que tu veux faire, souvent, c'est quand tu sauvegardes ce type de node-là, tu veux qu'il y ait cet événement-là qui arrive. Fait qu'on essaie de déplacer tout ce qui est automatisation comme ça, on essaie plutôt de le déplacer vers le code, parce qu'on trouve que c'est plus facile à manager comme ça. Fait que pour nous, ça n'a pas représenté un très gros enjeu que workflow soit pas prêt encore. Okay. C'est-à-dire, effectivement, si tu as besoin de l'interface graphique de workflow dans Drupal 8, là, malheureusement, j'ai pas de ETA, puis ça se peut que ça prenne longtemps parce qu'il n'est pas... j'ai pas l'impression que c'est un module qui a des commits comme à toutes les semaines dessus. Quand tu regardes les maintainers, puis les derniers commits, puis les derniers releases, à mon avis, ça va sortir dans un peu. C'est sûr, ma recommandation pour ça, c'est si toi-même tu es un développeur, si tu travailles avec des développeurs internes, c'est plutôt d'aller utiliser le MPP API de Drupal pour faire des actions sur le save, insert, update de tes MPP. Puis si tu ne travailles pas avec des développeurs, tout ça, c'est de trouver soit un développeur freelance, soit du monde de l'équipe de Symétris pour venir t'aider avec ce type d'intégration.
Ça, c'est pour des clients finalement qui font ça dans le back-end.
Qui eux, ils utilisent ça pour configurer
à l'interne pour pouvoir gérer leur contenu. Parce que bon, tu sais, à trouver un contenu avant qu'ils partent en ligne, on n'a pas besoin.
Ok.
Oh, you're the official photographer.
Même
You want me to kind of make a post?
on a le cas aussi.
Non, c'est ça, il est en alpha aussi.
Là, ou l'autre, je sais que j'utilisais l'autre dans le set, aucun problème, c'est bien intégré, ça marche vraiment.
Ouais.
Mais actuellement, sur le
Non, effectivement, c'est. Et puis c'est intéressant quand on évalue, tu sais, là, Brad vient de faire sa présentation sur Drupal 7 versus Drupal 8. Pour tous nos nouveaux clients, on prend le temps de faire l'analyse, de regarder ce set-là, qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec, est-ce qu'on l'envoie dans Drupal 8 ou pas. Et puis, souvent les choses qui vont dire non, c'est s'il y a une grosse intégration incluse, par exemple. Fait, ça fait partie de peut-être du ou des modules qu'on regarde le plus là, quand on pense à passer à Drupal 8.
Ouais, tout à fait. Puis, and just to kind of conclude on that is that this question is really important in the sense where a lot, like, I mean, we're no longer in a world where people are thinking of having a website. Everybody already has a website. So there's something that exists, there's something that's legacy, and you always have to think of what am I going to do if I'm going to move this over, and then oftentimes it comes to questions like, do I remove these features? But right now, kind of the status quo in the mind of a client is saying, in this site I have these things, so my new site should have these things plus other things, and they never think of these things, I don't really need them, let's take them off. And it's interesting, it kind of brings me back to the conference I saw a bit earlier today with Chris from Open, and he said, well, we no longer work in specs, we work in like business requirements, and then based on that we create like specs, and then we kind of, in the backlog, we let them fall to the bottom, and finally we're not really going to do the things that are not important. All right, so thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice weekend.